southeast London, and the weather here is a little bit windy and a few clouds in the sky, but it's nice and blue as well. So with me I should have Gregory now. Gregory, are you there?
Hello, yes, I'm here in Brussels, but I just
Okay.
like in the UK, in London.
Okay, very good, very good. Welcome to the show. So, dear
Thanks.
listeners, the aim of our show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdrushing. And every week we have a new topic for discussion. The topic tonight is the signs of the judgment. The signs of the judgment. And you can join in the discussion with any questions or comments. The number to contact us, you can contact us on our UK number, which is 07939 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. I'm going to begin with what is the Grail message? The Grail message in the light of truth by Abdrushing is a spiritual knowledge of life. It offers an explanation of the world, a picture of creation on the basis of natural laws. Its lectures contain valuable basic elements as a help in life. For through the knowledge mediated, the reader is again brought closer to life and led back to God. The Grail message deals with important fundamental questions of life by explaining in a clear and logical way the automatic working of the laws of nature, the whole weaving of creation, allowing every process to be recognized, and thereby the purpose of our whole life. It is directed at the individual and speaks to the innate experiences of the human being, their strengths and weaknesses. Thus, every reader has the opportunity to discover through the intuitive perception if what is stated is the truth. Combining with matter-of-fact reasoning, a complete world picture arises, where there is no separation between the visible world and the great world beyond the five senses, nor any separation between scientific and religious striving for knowledge. I would like to give you a couple of quotes from the author of the Grail message, Abdrushing. The hearer and reader of my lectures should always work within himself, keenly probing and building bridges from one lecture to the other, as well as out into the great and small world happenings. Only then will he be able to understand the Grail message and find that it gradually shapes itself into one complete whole, without leaving any gaps. Again and again, in all the happenings, the reader will come back to the basic features. He can explain everything without having to change even one single sentence. The word of the Grail message lives, so that it permits only those people who really carry the honest desire in their souls to find abundantly. All else is automatically rejected by it. For the arrogant and those who seek superficially, the message will remain the book with 7 seals. I'd like to give you one more quote from the author. I wish to fill the gaps which have so far always remained unanswered in the souls of men, and which never leave any serious thinker in peace, if he earnestly seeks for the truth. So, dear listeners, I just want to remind you the topic for discussion tonight, it is the signs of the judgment. And when I use that word judgment, many people might know this term in another way. like the Last Judgment or Judgment Day or even end times. There's so many expressions how it is used in various parts of the world, you could say. And so today we're going to explore that, the signs of the judgment. And you're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us on our UK number, it is 079 You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, you can. The number is 00447939641958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, I want to sort of get some quotes from the Bible about the judgment and the signs of the judgment. That's what we're talking about tonight. So this is something from Matthew chapter 23, verse 37. This is Jesus talking about love for Jesus' love for Jerusalem. That's what is headed on this verse. So this is Jesus speaking in the Bible here. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you killed the prophets and stoned the messengers of God. You stoned the messengers God has sent you. How many times have I wanted to put my arms around all your people, just as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you would not let me. And so your temple will be abandoned and empty. From now on, I tell you, you will never see me again until you say, God bless him who comes in the name of the Lord. And I just want to continue a bit further. It's it's in the next chapter, Matthew 24, verse 3, and it's starting with the title there is Troubles and Persecutions. And this is the disciples speaking to Jesus here. So as Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him in private. Tell us when all this will be, they asked, and what will happen to show that it is the time for your coming and the end of the age. Jesus answered, be on your guard and do not let anyone deceive you. Many men claiming to speak for me will come and say, I am the Messiah, and they will deceive many people. You are going to hear the noise of battles close by and news of battles far away. But do not be troubled. Such things must happen. But they do not mean the end has come. Countries will fight each other. Kingdoms will attack one another. There will be famines and earthquakes everywhere. All these things are like the first pains of childbirth. Then you will be arrested and handed over to be punished and put to death. All mankind will hate you because of me. Many will give up their faith at that time. They will betray one another and hate one another. Then many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Such will be the spread of evil, that many people's love will grow cold. But whoever holds out to the end will be saved. And this good news about the kingdom will be preached throughout the world for a witness to all mankind, and then the end will come. I'm going to stop there, Gregory. That's a quote from the Bible in Matthew, and there are other faiths also in Islam. Also, it's so the judgment, they call it the Judgment Day, more there, and they're also expecting, it's also called Day of Resurrection, where they're expecting, I don't have a direct quote, but they're expecting, people to all be raised from their graves, and then judgment will start, and they'll be judged by their deeds, and even the believers and unbelievers. So I'm not going to go too much into that. So there's the Judgment Day, as I said, has been written about or has been expressed there. And then there's many other teachings where it is not said like directly in these words, but there are some ideas about it. And for example, in Judaism, uh, because they're expecting the Messiah still, that's the big day for them. They're expecting. Again, I won't go too much into that. And there's other teachings. For example, in Hinduism, they don't mention it really as end times or in any such way, but they talk about cycles like reincarnation. There's always a cycle, uh, you know, happening. Everything comes to an sort of has a birth and a death, and then in reincarnation, there's also good and evil happening through reincarnation. So they think it continues in reincarnation. So that's another idea there. Um, I think I won't go into all the other things because it's going to get a bit too complicated to follow. So, Gregory, what I've just read there, let's say there are a lot of things expected to happen at the signs of the judgment. Now, first question is really yes, are these signs, are we able to observe them? Because many people think it's happening in this time we live today. And these things, there are signs there. Many people are saying, oh, yes, these type of things are happening, earthquakes and so on, disasters, people hating each other and so on, especially in this modern world of the media. The news comes out very fast. So would you say, are these signs that have been predicted, are these being seen now?
Well, thanks for that particular question. First, there must be clarity as to what is meant by the end times, or like you put it, judgment times, or the last judgment. The phrase "the last judgment" seemed to be most appropriate, for there had been judgment continually all this while, from even before the time of Christ to the present day. To understand most of the expressions which you mentioned, one has to interpret or look at the last judgment in spiritual terms. Spiritual terms in the sense that it transcends the different religion or the different cultures. What had happened is that the different religions or the different cultures interpreted the concept of the last judgment in their own way, such that they will understand it much better. However, in a spiritual term, the last judgment is unique. With the advent of the walk in the light of truth, one can only explain this in spiritual terms. To explain these things in spiritual terms, one must refer to the laws of nature or the laws of creation through which all that exists rest. For if indeed these expressions are facts of life, or are facts of nature, or are facts of creation, then these expressions must also conform to these laws of creation through which all that exists rests. Therefore, what one had observed basically in religions or in cultures are only part interpretation of these areas, part interpretations of their own perceptions of it. Because they are part interpretations, there are likely to be slight distortions, which makes it not very clear. What we would endeavor to do in this particular instance is to subject almost all this interpretation to the laws of nature, and at the same time examine this concept of the last judgment according to the laws of nature. Then, in following that pattern, one may find the signs which may present themselves, the signs of the last judgment. But these signs are only perceptible to those who, through their intuitions, are very vigilant. Only through vigilance, and albeit spiritual vigilance, are these signs perceptible, and to some extent, in earthly expression, perceptible. For if one does not refer to the spirit or spiritual vigilance, almost all the signs will be the same thing. So one should be prepared to differentiate happenings of the past and happenings of the present. Examine them spiritually. Then it becomes very clear. So it's a challenge for each individual or each listener to weigh whether what had happened in the past, like earthquakes and disasters, is what is happening now. Or have these things not happened in the past? These are the questions they must ask themselves. And what is different between what had happened in the past, 1,000 years before, 2,000 years ago, or more than that? What is different between that, the happenings of that time, and the happenings of these times? It is only on such a basis that one can then differentiate and say, now it's clear to me, indeed, this is likely to be the times of the last judgment. For there had been a lot of judgments in the past. Judgments in the sense of earthly or non-earthly manifestation. The word judgment itself gives the very clear concept of giving account for what has been entrusted to a particular person. When you need to give an account on how you have done it, how you have spent what has been entrusted to you, then that becomes like a judgment. One is now able to differentiate those who have frittered away their time and those who have used the time and energy granted to them beneficially.
Thank you for that, Gregory. There are so many things you've said there. I think your main focus was that you need to see these things spiritually, um, and that really puts a totally different angle to what I was saying earlier at the beginning, which are like earthly events going on. And so now I think, and you've mentioned that these things are happening through the laws of nature. So, which may be a little bit surprising because you think, oh, when you think of the judgment, let's say those of us who are have the, let's say, some belief in the faith of, let's say, there's a creator, and then you think, oh, it's the creator who brings about the judgment. So we are judged by the creator, you know, and so then you say, oh, the laws of nature are um, involved. So it's hard to sort of come to see that. And you've also mentioned, there's so many things you mentioned. I'm just sort of a little bit summarizing what you've said. Um, for example, you mentioned this is what we're talking about here is the last judgment in our show today. There have been judgments in the past, 2,000 years ago, since then, before them. So this is like ongoing. And but now we're talking about the last judgment as if it's something, let's say, the way we have behaved, let's say as human beings, we won't get another opportunity after this. uh, you know um, so, and then I did mention the different words that we use for the word judgment. We've used the last judgment, judgment day, end times. So these are the words which express the same concept. So now, let's explore that a bit. So, Greg, you mentioned about the natural laws, that this judgment is happening, you know, let's say in accordance with natural laws. Um, can you explain that a bit more? Because, as I say, I talked about the Creator uh, being part of the judgment. Let's say bringing the judgment. So, is that somehow something different then? Uh, that the Creator doesn't get involved with this judgment?
Well, what one should consider basically is that there are these laws which are instrumental in creation or in nature. For we must always, in any discussion of this type, refer to nature as the reference, because without nature, even we ourselves as human beings will not exist. There will be no plants, there will be no elements, there will be no weather. So we must refer to nature as our reference point. And since nature didn't just come in an arbitrary form, there must be a pattern. When one is referring to these laws of nature, these laws must be an expression of a will. It is the expressions of this particular will that is referred to as the laws of nature or the laws of creation in a more grander scale. Sometimes they are referred to as the divine laws. It is the divine laws that mandates that here we are on earth as human spirits who have come to experience in order to mature. That whilst here on earth, all the processes, all the mechanism that is there to help us to mature must be subject to these laws. For it is generally heard that whatever a soul has put in creation, it is that which the soul has to reap. So it's like a reciprocity. So one may refer to this particular one, that law of reciprocal action exists in every process, in every object, in every living thing. It is the balance of movement that ensures harmony. Again, another manifestation of this law may be that of the attraction of homogeneity, in which the birds of a feather, they do come together. Like you find a herd of animals will flock together, just like human spirits come together. So we have that law of the attraction of homogeneity, for it could not be otherwise. And then one can easily understand that even in physical interaction, that which is heavy sinks, and that which is light rises. Even in our feelings, in deep, when we feel good, it's as if we are floating, and when we feel sad, it's as if we are sinking. These are part expressions of the effect of the laws of creation. These three basic laws are the keepers. They maintain our processes in creation. When one now understands that, then one will start wondering, who instituted these laws? There must have been a source through which these laws came into existence. That law, that power, which power ensures there is motion in the creation, there is motion in nature, that is the source of these laws. There are many names depending on the religion or depending on the culture. They have different expressions for this particular, but it is a unique power which streams through all that exists. And through our own free will, we are able to direct this power for that which is beneficial and helpful to us personally as human spirits, and also to the human spirits who, like us, have come here in order to experience. That power which is beneficial also to the environment not only to the physical environment, but to the non-physical, which is not visible to the physical eye. That is the so-called ethereal environment, which many refer to. Therefore, it is the laws, these same laws that the Creator had placed in creation in His perfect wisdom that ensures the coming into being, the maintenance, and the dissolution in such a way that whatever a personality had put into creation, that is what that particular person will have to reap as a consequence. And along that line, the concepts now become clearer and clearer, that there are cycles, and what is being referred to now is the last cycle. That is what we intend to discuss this evening.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I've got more questions to ask you, but before I ask them, I want to let the listeners know you're listening to Blessed Radio. It's the Tuesday evening spiritual discussion program from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdrushin. And if you're interested in getting a copy of the Grail message or want to get some more information, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And the topic we're discussing tonight is the signs of the judgment. And you can consider the judgment to be Judgment Day, the Last Judgment, or End Times. People express it in different ways, but it's the same, what we're referring to here. So we're talking about the signs of the judgment. And you're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us is our UK number, which is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, I want to talk about, because what most people understand by the judgment is the judgment of your deeds, good and evil. And we've talked about the laws that they're working there. You mentioned those 3 laws, um, and they're happening, you could say, automatically. Let's just quickly, I'll just repeat them just in a very summarized way. There's an action, and then you make the action as a human being, and then there's a reaction. You sow what you sow, you shall reap. So the reaping is brought by the natural law of the law, let's say the law of reciprocal action, as it is called in the Grail message. So what you sow, you shall reap. That is what we know. And so you sow there. And then another one, you said law of attraction. I think you call it law of homogeneity, or let's say like attracts like. That was, and then birds of a feather flock together was another way to put it. And then the third law you mentioned was gravity, where something's heavy that sinks and then something that is light rises. Now, what I want to ask Gregory, concerning good and evil, because in the signs that we've been told about, there'll be war, there'll be famines, there'll be earthquakes. I know you said there's a spiritual thing that we need to grasp. It's not the earthly is there's a possibility of misunderstanding or confusion if we don't see it from the spiritual standpoint. So, but one of the things about the spiritual thing is the good and evil, that people do good, people do evil. So in this judgment we're talking about, or the last judgment, let's say, is this like a last chance to save ourselves in the sense of from the sin, from the evil that we have done? Is that my question? Is that so? Is that the last chance for us with this judgment that we're talking about, to save ourselves from the evil?
Well, first one has to again look at the concept of evil and the concept of good. But this concept must also be subjected to spiritual laws, or what one refers to as the laws of nature. Only those things which harmonize with the laws of nature and bring benefit to not only the individual, but also the surrounding of the individual, so that they are in accordance with the spiritual laws. Only those things are considered to be good spiritually. Otherwise, they are not good. One may refer to them as being bad or being evil. For the spiritual laws are such that in their operations, they bring benefit or provide benefit first through the personality that has initiated an activity. They bring benefit to that particular personality spiritually, and also bring benefit to those around him or those that are homogeneous to him. Or one may refer to, with such activities, these swing in accordance with the laws of nature. If one may take the example of music, when a musician composes music, this composition is such that the different sounds harmonize, and in such a way they bring, joy to the listener. There are other instances where these sounds do not harmonize, and they cause not only headache but cause illness to that personality. So the laws of nature through which every process, every object came into existence, these laws work in harmony to bring benefits in accordance with the will of the Creator. So that is how one is able to judge spiritually whether one's volition having been put out there is beneficial or not. And once that one has been clarified within one, it is then very clear whatever one has put out there as a strong volition to become deeds, if it is of benefit, not only to the individuals, but also to the surrounding or to one's neighborhood. Hence you have when the discussion when love thy neighbor as thyself, because thy neighbor, like you, is also striving to come to maturity such that it can go back home. When one considers all this, then it becomes very clear what is bound to happen in due course. And then one can see or can experience the effect of one's activities on others. For indeed, whatever you have put out there for others is a part of your volition. It also returns to you because you are the author of such a volition. So if it brings good to others, it also brings good to you. If it now goes out and brings death and destruction to others, then you are responsible for responsibility for one's volition and activities is the key. And therefore, one can look around here on earth or in the earthly or in the non-earthly. What is one's volition? Has it brought any benefit to one's neighbor or not? So whenever you have confusion, you have wars, you have destruction, then the volitions have not been right. There must have been something which do not accord with the laws of creation, and because of that have precipitated a scenario of confusion.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I'm trying to think, how the world is. In general, man seems to has advanced in technological level, but let's say there is still the hatred, there's still harm being done. And then I'm thinking, let's say we know there are the laws that say you reap what you sow. You have to have responsibility for what you have done. Now, what I want to say there is, Gregory, we human beings, we're not really perfect. We always, I mean, you can't really see anything that we've done perfectly, right? It's always something not going right. Either it's a mistake or malicious things or, hatred, like we said. So, my question is then, are we able to redeem ourselves 100%? So, we're talking about the judgment times here, or what is expected to happen in the judgment times. Uh, are we expected to sort of uh, clean ourselves, or of all sin and of all sort of wrong, um, or is it just because we are not perfect, we just do our best, and then, let's say, in this judgment time, uh, let's say your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds, and so that's enough for us to, let's say, have salvation.
The the problem is always that in quote the deeds are measured by earthly concepts, by the intellect, whereas the deeds should be measured by spiritual concepts. For when examined aright, it is the spirit. By spirit, one is talking about the core, the inner core, or the kernel that makes up, or that really is alive, of which the physical body is only a cloak. The intellect is a product of the physical body, and therefore its perception or perceptions are limited, are tied to that of the physical body. Whereas of the spirit is a much broader perception. Of the spirit, one may talk about the intuitive perception. It is the intuitive perception that holds the power, not the intellect. It is the intuitive perception which is an expression of activity, of evolution of the spirit. It is that one that holds. It is that which helps to determine whether that which had been put out is noble or ignoble, in such a way that the laws of nature have an impact on the nature of devolution. If devolution is pure and in accordance with the laws of nature, it will uplift the surrounding and uplift man. It is those volitions that is referred to in the judgment. It is those volitions that makes a man to be ignoble or to be noble. It is those volitions that sometimes bring a man back here on it to experience in order to mature in other areas, and bringing the soul back into a different body, being granted a new opportunity, is what many now refer to as reincarnation. It is the evolution which the spirits have built up and has used in experiencing, which counts. For this world, which we are discussing now, is only temporal. And when one is referring to the world of matter, one has only come here to experience the world of matter. Here in the world of matter, we know, even in the sciences, that it started gradually. where things are we're talking of the electrons, the atoms, the build up, they join in nucleus, and such a way that they join little by little, and in that case, it's more of an integration of the different parts of the energy precipitation that now builds up. And it builds up over some time before we now start having biological, in which before too long we had plants, and then we had animals, and the human spirit had to incarnate on the most advanced animal body in order to make use of it. Now, once you consider in the whole process, according to the laws of nature, there had been an integration and of these elements. And it's not going to be like that forever. As you have an integration, it now goes on to a different stage where, like you have in a farm, seeds are planted. And when these seeds are planted, there is the time for them to grow, come to maturity, and then there's harvest. When you now have that harvest, this soil is turned round. And when that soil is turned round, another sets, or sometimes the land is left fallow. In such a manner is also what you have in the world of matter, where we have the integration of the different units, starting from energy precipitation, and then it goes through a dissolution back to the primeval state before things recombine and continues again and again. So the time granted for the growth and maturity of the human spirit is not infinite. That means there is a boundary in which that which is of spirit that has come into the world of matter to mature, that time is finite. And when it is near time of dissolution, it is necessary for the human spirit that has been planted into the world of matter to sever itself in such a way that only those things which are noble will be of interest, will be of longing to it. For those human spirits who are striving towards nobility, they will be, attracted up. Whereas for those others who are not striving towards nobility and knowledge, they will still hold on to the world of matter, in which through time this world of matter will undergo dissolution, and in such a state they themselves will be crushed. That means the form which they had acquired up to that point of separation, that form will also be crushed, and they will go back to their primeval state. That is not called progress. So one has to see the picture of this world judgment, or the last judgment, in that sense.
Thank you for your answer, Gregory. There's one bit, a little bit I'm confused about, because you mentioned about reincarnation, and then you also mentioned that there's a finite time for the spirit to, let's say, develop. And what I'm confused about is that reincarnation, that can for me that's like a cycle, so you can keep going, like I'm going to use the word infinite cycles. And, you can keep recycling. I don't want to really use that word, but you can, reincarnating. So if that is the case, because everything has a we've talked about the natural law. You sow and you reap, you sow and you reap. So with reincarnation you're sowing and reaping, which is a constant cycle. And then at the same time you're saying spirit has a finite time for development. So I'm a bit puzzled about that. Why can't the spirit keep being allowed to keep developing further and further? Why is that?
In the explanation one put forward, one stressed that the human spirit gem descended into the world of matter in order to experience and mature. The world of matter has its boundary. The world of matter is temporal. It comes into a definite structure. It matures, and before too long, it dissolves. It means there is a time factor, a time limit for that. Within the time limit in which the world of matter has come into existence and dissolves again, that is a very long time in human concepts. That is the period granted for the human spirit that has sunk into the world of matter to mature. If it's within that period, on many occasions, it will, while the world of matter is still there, maturing, the human spirit is still able to come, because it spends about maybe 100 years maximum or 200 years. And then after some experiencing, goes into the beyond, still within the world of matter, comes back to experience again many, many, many times. But there comes a time when the world of matter needs to undergo dissolution. In that case, it therefore means that the human spirit is unable to use the world of matter for maturing. The time granted to it is sufficient to have matured in such a way in order to return home as a full-fledged spirit, becoming not only conscious but self-conscious. That is, it has developed those innate talents which have been implanted into it. If it's able to do that, or is striving along that direction, then when it's time for the world of matter to be dissolved or to dissociate back into its primeval status, then the personality must have been matured enough through his spiritual activity to be attracted up. If, on the other hand, it has not been matured enough, then along with the dissolution of the world of matter, the personality, or the structure, the human form which had been granted to it also dissolves or is now torn apart. So reincarnation is only possible for the human spirit in the time granted it in the world of matter.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I can see here you have said even at the beginning that this what you're talking about needs to be understood in a spiritual sense, because these are spiritual activities going on, and so, and yet we are living on the earth, and of course we need to understand, you could say, in a physical sense, what is happening on the earth as well. So yes, we know we are born. We also know, you've said about, we die, and then there's something called reincarnation, and then you have explained it can't be forever, the reincarnation, because I mean, I understand there's a, in a way, time limit for the, even the sun and the universe. One day it will die, everything, all of that matter will die. So I could understand from that side that there's a time limit for reincarnation, at least in the physical level, to be coming back onto this earth over and over, because there's a time scale, that the earth will never be there, will not be there forever, and the sun will not be there forever. So I've sort of understood that. And then, of course, there's the world uh, of, let's say, you mentioned ethereal, you mentioned a spiritual world, and which continues. So let me. Um, this, I'm trying to just comprehend this picture, um, the whole process that you're talking about. There's another aspect which we haven't talked about. Okay, let's say I know I'm going to the, let's say, other religions or teachings. In the judgment, when they talk about the judgment, they also mention heaven and hell, and as an outcome of the judgment. And you haven't talked about that at all. It seems, uh, or at least you haven't described it that way. So I just want to understand that. Where does heaven and hell come into what you have been talking about? Is there such a thing? Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? What is the consequence of the judgment?
Well, though it wasn't mentioned directly. One, with respect to define the last judgment, one can understand very simply that if the volition and the deeds of the human personality are in accordance to the laws of nature, or to the will, in accordance to the will of the Creator, then these activities must have spun threads, which threads are now attracted, such that the experience which the human spirit has built up will be attracted upwards to, upwards beyond the boundary of dissolution of the activities of the human spirit. These threads that hold it above that region. On the contrary, for those human spirits whose volitions, deeds, whose activities are ignoble because they so much enjoy the world of matter and they are unwilling to let it go. They are unwilling to spin threads, which is beneficial not only to them but also to their neighborhood, to their environment. Those human spirits will be tied due to their own personal volition to the world of matter. And in the process of disintegration of the world of matter, they themselves are drawn into it. In the process of that disintegration, they themselves will now have to undergo, experience that disintegration. And the experiences will be so severe that it is worse than hell. A process in which they are being torn apart, just as the world of matter is disintegrating. So the personal structure, the human structure, which they had initially been permitted at the beginning, will also be destroyed. Such is referred to as the effacement from the book of life, such that they cease to exist as a personality. They are no more a personality. That region, which is referred to a mild language, may be referred to as hell, whereas the others are then attracted through their volition above that level of boundary of disintegration and keep their personality, their human form, and go back to the origin where they started from as unconscious spirit gem, now returning back home as conscious or self-conscious personality. That's the picture which generally is seen in the Last Judgment. But before the Last Judgment, it has always been that a human personality, due to their decisions, have chosen that which is ignoble, which is evil. And in accordance with the laws of attraction of homogeneity, those things which are ignoble, they come together such that they will have to experience. For instance, greed will attract those who are greedy. Wickedness will attract those who are wicked, such that they need to experience themselves. Whereas noble thinking, noble volition, supporting one another will attract those who act that way. When those people of evil volition, of greedy volition, are attracted and live in the same neighborhood, they will then experience this greed to a much higher degree upon themselves. And in such a way, it will force them to become vigilant, or it will force them to throw away such a greed. If it is the greed or it is the volition of wickedness, they themselves will come across, in accordance with the laws of creation, those who are wicked, who are maybe 10 or 100 times more wicked. Maybe in such a neighborhood, they will experience wickedness to the core that they will now do not wish to pursue such a direction. That neighborhood of such ignoble behavior may be referred to as hell. Whereas the other neighborhood where supports, where they love their neighbor just like themselves, and they are willing to support their neighbor, whom they realize like themselves are striving to build up, such neighborhoods may be also be referred to as heaven.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Dear listeners, you're listening to Blessed Radio. This is the spiritual discussion program from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abrushin. And if you are interested in getting a copy of the Grail message or want to get some more information, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, Grail, message, message.com. And the topic we're discussing tonight, it is the signs of the judgment. the signs of the judgment. And when I say judgment, that can be referred to as the judgment day or last judgment or the end times, because these other expressions are also used, and it is the same thing. And if you have any questions or comments on this topic, you can contact us on our UK number, which is 079 You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 00447939641958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, I want to go back more about the signs. We've been talking about the judgment itself, but let's go back to the signs of the judgment. And there are many prophecies and descriptions, you could say, of what is expected to happen. Now, some talk about, for example, Jesus coming back. There's the Antichrist appearing, and also maybe, some people in Islam, they call him like a Messiah. I will call him this, like a savior. So maybe some people think it could be Jesus coming back. Some people think it could be someone else coming back. And then there's basically like a war between good and evil, which the Messiah will succeed in, winning for the good, obviously. And then he will rule. And I mean, there will be a good. We are talking on the earthly criteria. I know up till now we've been focusing or bringing out the spiritual aspect and the spiritual signs you've been talking about, but this is supposed to apparently take place in the physical. So I just first check with you this sort of example that I've given of sort of the sign of the Antichrist and the Messiah, call him Messiah, let's say, was coming at this time of this judgment. First of all, is that first of all true, and is it meant to be an earthly happening? Yeah, let's talk about that first.
The challenge for many is, how are they able to recognize the signs? First, like we have stressed, these signs must be understood spiritually before it percolates to the earthly. For you might perceive a sign, you might see a sign, you are unable to differentiate whether it is a trivial sign or a very serious sign. You mentioned the return of Jesus, as many others have said it, that he said he will come again. That is how they have, interpreted it. And therefore, they are expecting a Messiah. But how do they picture this Messiah? That is the challenge. Because they expect a Messiah to just fall out from the sky and go about preaching. Then, if such does not happen, they fall back into their unbelief, or they reject. The signs will not be supernatural. It will be natural. It means these signs must also follow the laws of creation, through which everything that is in creation or in nature rests. And therefore, it is of prime importance not to hold the wrong interpretation of many. For if one examines everything that comes one's path, and there are many teachings, as was predicted at the end times, when there will be so-called many teachings here and there, it was said that at that time is when he who is expected will appear. It therefore means the human spirit must be prepared to examine whatever comes its path, such that he himself or herself can recognize. There are many cognitions that abound here on earth. Only he or she who is vigilant enough is able, from the cognitions, which is the earthly appearance of many things, only he or she is able to fillet out that which is important, that which is of upbuilding, from that which is temporal and not so good. Therefore, the key sign here is that there will be many, many, many religions as we have here on earth. But the challenge now for man to recognize the sign in the recognition of that sign in accordance with the laws through which all came into existence, in the recognition from these cognitive objects that you see physically, therein lies the challenge for each individual. Because it is said, at that same time, he himself who is expected will be recognized. Be recognized in the sense which is said, by their works we shall know them. So man should be on the alert to recognize through the works of him who is expected. Only through such recognition would we say genuinely they have been vigilant, else they have not. So that is one. At the same time, it is said at the times of the judgment, the Antichrist will raise its head. It only means if he's going to raise his head at that time, it means he has been around. But at the same time means its activities has come to the fore, all right, has come to the maximum. And you can yourself, over the centuries, for one who is alert, one can look at all the manifestations for the past 100 and something years, compare it to the past, since one is expecting to judge only by earthly signs. And in the place where you have the accumulations, at the same time you have the plethora of religions, of cultures, and all sorts of things, one is able to determine that which is of benefit, which enables man to rise, or which makes man sink. So the onus is on the personality, for the signs have already been given, but they themselves must walk within themselves through the right recognition to know that which is genuine, which is upbuilding, or from that which leads to the gallows.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I want to read a lecture from the Grail message, not the whole lecture, but let's say three quarters of it, because just to portray a picture. And the lecture I would like to read is called The Antichrist, which basically exactly what you've just talked about. It sort of covers that. So I just want to bring that out. But I don't want, I'm not going to read the whole lecture, but three quarters of it, because just to make clear, um, you know, what Gregory you have been already talking about. So this is the lecture called Antichrist in the Grail Message in the Light of Truth by Abdushin. Men, when the hour comes in which, according to the divine will, the purification and winnowing must take place on earth, then watch for the predicted and partly supernatural signs in the sky. Do not then allow yourselves to be confused by those men and also churches who have already long ago surrendered to the Antichrist. It is sad that until now not even the churches have known where to look for this Antichrist, although he has been active among all men for so long. If they had only been a little on the alert, they must have recognized it. Who can possibly act in a more anti-Christian manner than those who at that time fought with Christ himself and finally also murdered him? Who could have revealed themselves in a worse and more obvious way as antagonistic to Christ? They were the leaders and representatives of earthly religion and the true teaching of God, as revealed in and through the Son of God, did not agree with what they had built up. So I'm going to read that line again. They were leaders of and representatives of earthly religion and the true teaching of God, as revealed in and through the Son of God, did not agree with what they had built up. Indeed, the true message of God could not be reconciled with it, because the structure set up by the priestly dignitaries was aimed at earthly influence, earthly power, and expansion. They proved quite clearly that they were servants of the human intellect, which is directed solely towards earthly knowledge and earthly power, and is hostile and obstructive to everything that lies beyond earthly comprehension. Now, since God remains completely outside the range of earthly intellectual knowledge, as also does the spiritual, the intellect is clearly the only real obstacle thereto. Thus, by its nature, it is opposed to all that is divine and all that is spiritual. And with it, logically, therefore, all men who acknowledge their intellect as of paramount importance and seek to build upon that. The religious leaders of those days were afraid of losing influence among the people through the enlightenment of the Son of God. As everyone today knows, this was the main reason for the slanders they sought to spread against Christ, and ultimately also for the execution of the Son of God. They nailed him to the cross as a blasphemer of the very God whom he was sent, I'll say that again. They nailed him to the cross as a blasphemer of the very God by whom he was sent to bring enlightenment, and whose servants they professed to be. They tried to make people believe that they were serving God. But how little did they really know this God and his will, for whose honor and earthly defense this Son of God, the divine messenger, was however murdered by them. This was clearly the disastrous result of their enslavement to the earthly intellect, which fought solely to maintain its influence thereby. They allowed themselves to be the executioner as the tools of the Antichrist, whom they had secretly enthroned in their hearts. For this satisfied their human weaknesses, their presumption, arrogance, and vanity. Whoever expects clearer proof cannot be helped, for there is nothing more antagonistic to Christ, the Son of God, and his words. Indeed, Antichrist signifies the fighter against Christ, against man's redemption in God's message. The earthly intellect drove them to it. This very intellect, as a poisonous product of Lucifer, is an instrument for him which has become the greatest danger to mankind. Thus, the disproportionate overdevelopment of the human intellect in the past has grown into the hereditary sin for man. Behind this, however, stands Lucifer himself as Antichrist in person. He it is who through men was able to raise his head. He, the only real enemy of God. He acquired this name of Antichrist through his hostile struggle against the mission of the Son of God. None other would have had the strength and power to become the Antichrist. And in his warfare against the will of God, Lucifer makes use not merely of one man on earth, but nearly all mankind, thus leading them to destruction under the effect of the divine wrath. Whoever cannot grasp this most obvious fact, that only Lucifer himself could be the Antichrist, who dares to oppose God, will never be able to understand anything of all that takes place outside of the world of gross matter, that is, outside of what is purely earthly. And as it was then, so it is still today. Indeed, far worse. Today, today too, many religious representatives will wish to fight bitterly to maintain earthly intellectual ordinances hitherto upheld in the temples and churches. It is precisely this human intellect, the blunting that blunts. I'll start that again. It is this. It is precisely this human intellect, blunting all nobler intuition, that is one of the most insidious growths of Lucifer, which he was able to spread among mankind. All slaves of the intellect, however, are in truth Lucifer's servants, who are accomplices in the terrible collapse which must thus befall mankind. Since no one suspected that Antichrist lurked beneath the intellect, he could extend his sinister influence all the more easily. Lucifer triumphed, for he thereby cut off mankind from any comprehending of all that lies outside the world of gross matter, from real life, from that place where contact is first made with the spiritual, which leads to the proximity of God. With this he set his foot upon this earth as Lord of the earth and of the greater part of mankind. No wonder then he could penetrate to the altars and the representatives of earthly religions, also of Christian churches, were bound to become his victims, for they too expect the Antichrist just before the predicted judgment. Up till now, the great revelation in the Bible, like many other things, has never yet been understood in this respect. The revelation says that this Antichrist will raise his head before the judgment, but not that he will first appear then. If it is said therein that he raises his head, this clearly indicates that he must have been here already, but not that he has yet to come. It means that he will have reached the zenith of his dominion just before the judgment. Listen to this cry of warning, you who are not yet spiritually deaf and blind. Take the trouble for once to think quite seriously about it yourselves. If you remain indolent in this respect, you give yourselves up as lost. If you lift the protecting cover from the lair of a poisonous snake, that suddenly realize it is exposed, it will naturally try to rear up and bite this ruthless hand. It is no different here. Finding himself exposed, the Antichrist will quickly protest through his servants on being unmasked. He will make a great outcry and try in every possible way to maintain himself on the throne which mankind so willingly offered him. But all this he can only do through those who inwardly revere him. Therefore, now keep a sharp watch on your surroundings when the conflict begins. By their very outcry, you will all the more surely recognize them, everyone who belongs to him. For once again, as before, fear of a pure truth will make them side with its opponents. I'm just going to stop there, Gregory. It's a long reading in this lecture, and there's quite a bit I know you have said already, but it sort of it's good to have that presented here. So I hope listeners you were able to understand that and absorb that. I know I've received some questions, Gregory, from some listeners. I just want to check what they are asking, what are they saying. Okay, so I've got a question about the judgment. Will the judgment be continuous or at some point come to an end? So the listener's asking, will the judgment be continuous or at some point come to an end?
Are we referring to the final judgment or the... So this is the challenge.
Right, okay.
There is just one final judgment. That final judgment, which is the separation of that which is spiritual from that which is earthly. So that means the separation of the spiritual from matter. That is the final judgment. But as we've mentioned in the past, the sowing and the reaping, these are expressed also as judgment. So the law of reciprocity itself, inherent in it, the cycle being completed, is in itself judgment.
Okay, so it's like the answer is, let's say, continuous. I mean, there is a continuous cycle, action and reaction, or and the reaction you can say is the judgment, sowing and reaping. So there's always a judgment, and then there's a last judgment, which I think you're saying that refers to the earthly, right? So because
let me repeat what.
Yes.
There is the final judgment. That final judgment is the separation of the spirit from matter. That is like the winnowing of that which is useful for upbuilding spiritually from that which is useless for in spiritual upbuilding. That is the final judgment. As for the human spirit, in which it still permitted to make decisions which are also subject to sowing and reaping. When you reap, that is, in quotes, a judgment, because that reaping either enables you to rise higher or to sink. So what one is stressing here is not just to make statements and leave them that way. The idea is to sort of prod each person to strive to understand the concept of judgment in accordance with the laws of creation, instead of considering judgment as something which is over there. When you breathe in, you also breathe out. That cycle is completed. If you find those who breathe in without breathing out, you can say in judgment to them, you know where they will go. If you find those who are able to take minerals or take water and keep everything within, and there's no waste elimination, you yourself can know what judgment is. So the concept which one is pushing out here is to consider the judgment in accordance with the laws of creation, rather than as something which is just there, and to differentiate that from the final judgment, where the spirit is separated from matter. Much of this can, or all of it, or something better, can be found in the work In the Light of Truth, the Grail message. There is a lecture, The World, which explains everything.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Dear listeners, you're listening to Blessed Radio. It's the Tuesday evening spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdushin. And if you are interested in getting a copy of the Grail message or want some more information, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that. www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And if you have any question, the topic we're discussing tonight, it is called, the title is The Signs of the Judgment. The Signs of the Judgment, which we are referring to here, the Last Judgment, or Judgment Day, or the End Times. If you're interested in, if you have any questions or any comments, you can join in the discussion. The number to contact us, our UK number is 079 39641958. And if you're outside of UK, it is 00447939641958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, let's now look at, what is expected, let's say as a result of the judgment. So, what's the future? Is man, because we don't know how long the judgment takes, right? So it looks like it's a process. And so is man likely to, you could say, so I don't want to use the word survive because it sounds a bit difficult. It sounds a bit too much on the edge. So, is man likely to pass the judgment and, reach, you said, be useful for spiritual development and the continuous, activity? Or is it that man is not going to achieve that?
In considering this particular expression in accordance with the laws, it becomes personal. That is, it depends on the personality, on the sort of cross, or on the volition he himself or herself has put into creation. That means on the threads that he had given rise to. If these threads only hold on to that which is ignoble, or that which is earthly, or these threads are evil, it means to be able to nourish and enjoy these threads. Right? Threads One is referring to a line of activity. To be able to enjoy these traits, which are ignoble, it has to bind itself to the world of matter or to earthly things. One may consider there are some who so much like food, all right? They will eat until they can eat no more. To them, it is more than a hobby. There are some who are so much drawn to sexual intercourse, all right? And they spend all their time on such. There are others who are bent on gossips, and they spend all their time involved in such things. There are also others who, in their trades, in their activities, spend their energy in support to many other struggling human spirits in different forms. One, in doing these things, makes a decision. The law of the Lord says, whoever has been helped, whoever has received, you make use of what you have received, first to understand it to help yourself and spread it around such that others other than you will also benefit from that which is noble that you have received. There are some who will not follow that principle, and therefore they remain behind because they like greed. They excel in greed, and such is only possible in the world of matter or here on earth. In all naturalness, those ones cannot ascend, whereas the other ones who have received nobleness and have passed on nobleness, they have spun threads, which threads will be attracted by those who are higher than them and by those who are higher than the other ones. In such a way, they will go higher and higher and higher. Whereas the other ones who have spun evil and greed, the threads they have spun will be attracted by those who are more greedy or greedier than themselves, and the ones who are greedier than the ones closest to them. In such a way, they will be drawn lower and lower. And when the time then comes for the separation of spirits, of which they are, from matter, those who have stuck themselves to matter, they are unable to sever themselves, and therefore they will have to experience the disintegration of matter. Whereas the other ones who are done the opposite thing must have left the world of matter and are able to experience those things which are nobler. But this does not just happen. Even after the separation, just like you have in the farm, when you have things like wheat, there is the winnowing of wheat. That means you now have to separate the chaff from the real wheat. It is the real wheat which you make use of. The chaff, all the stem, all those things are left behind. So you can see in the winnowing, this is what then happens. For others, will be crushed. So once the concept is well understood, many a question or many an argument will become clear suddenly.
Thank you for that, Gregory. What I'm wondering, from what you've said there, it sounds like everybody's on their own. You choose your way, and you get the consequence of your choice. And somebody choose. Let's say you go. One person says, "I'm going left," another person says, "Going right," another one going straight. And we're talking about our, let's say, good and evil here, really. We choose to do good or we choose to do something else, let's say. So, from what you're saying, is you get the reward for what what you sow, you shall reap. So it's like everything is in our own hands. Now, um, uh, does that mean there's no other help? You're just on your left on your own, or because there was another thing we've said in the science of many false teachers around. So that's not a very good. Um, how can I say prophecy that going to be misled as well. So there's a whole that there as well. So is there any other, so we left to ourselves, Gregory, to sort our way, find our way to salvation, where we do not get sucked, like you talked about the spirit being separated from matter in the final sort of separation. So are we left by ourselves?
It has never been that the human spirit that has come into the world of matter to mature, it's never been that it has ever been left alone. There has always been help. However, how does the human spirit perceive that which is helpful or not helpful if the human spirit, does not examine it? Therefore, it comes very clear that whatever assail us must be examined rigorously. And one should never forget, the human spirit has never been left alone, has always been supported through one's conscience, through examples that it finds here and there. However, what has never been taken away from the human spirit is the free will to make decisions. So, in that case, with a good volition which will help to strengthen the human spirit, a volition which should be beneficial to the human spirit, not only to him, but also for those of good volition, for its neighbors, for its environment. Of course, such intuitive volition is not difficult for the personality to grasp. It knows that whenever it lends a hand to a fellow human spirit who, like him, is striving to mature, it who has lent a hand feels elated because it has been helpful to another, be it to a fellow human spirit or an animal or to the environment. As long as it harbors a strong good volition, help will always be available and is always available. The thing is he able to make use of this help? How are you able to differentiate that which is helpful from that which is not so very helpful if you do not examine that which comes across? Therefore, the key thing is the human spirit must examine him. For what it believes must be examined. Only through examination will the belief that they have held become personal conviction. Personal, because it requires spiritual activity, not earthly or intellectual activity. These are two different things. Therefore, the human spirit is never alone, but helps abound everywhere. All it needs to do through his threads that he spins is to open up through his or her intuition. And with the right volition, we'll see help everywhere.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I've been told we're actually gone off air just, let's say, a couple of minutes ago. I'm trying to get that sorted. Just want to get the message across for that. But I'll just remind listeners you're listening to Blessed Radio, even if you might not hear us at this moment. This is the Spiritual Discussion Program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdushin. And the topic for tonight is the signs of the judgment. And when we say judgment, we're referring to Judgment Day or last judgment, or the end times, as people call it that way as well. And if you want to join in with the show with any questions or comments, the number to contact us is our UK number, which is 07939641958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 00447939641958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. I'm just going to check if listeners, we can just make sure we are still online. Or if we are back online, rather. Okay, that's not. I'm not able to get access to the person right now. Gregory, is there anything while we're waiting? I really can't say we are online yet. Anything you'd like to maybe read from the Grail message right now while I'm just sorting out the broadcast?
I just wondered if, even if I read something, I'm reading it for us.
Yes, that's what I'm a little bit hard to. Let me try it one more time.
Yeah, try.
Yeah, we just got only 10 minutes to go now, and I'd rather we finish the show in the full time, so if we can. Yes, I think they know the problem because they're broadcasting something else right now. Just check something. Yeah. Okay, I know they're broadcasting something else right now. I can see that. But let's call an end to now because I think it's not more we can do. Oh, we are back. Apparently, we are back. Dear listeners, hope you can hear me now. I'm Saad. and this is the Spiritual Discussion Program, and I've got Gregory with me. And the topic we're discussing tonight, we got a bit cut off, I believe, for 5 minutes. Just to remind you, this is the Spiritual Discussion Program on Bless Radio. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abrushin. And the topic we're discussing tonight is the signs of the judgment. And when I use the word judgment, the judgment, I'm referring to the last judgment, or it's known as Judgment Day, or even the day of resurrection, or end times. Gregory, I think I'm going to ask, I think I might have a question from a listener here. Yes, so basically, Gregory, I mentioned the word, the day of resurrection, and I know we've been talking in spiritual terms. We're trying to explain this judgment in spiritual terms so that we can understand that. So what do we mean by resurrection, Gregory? What does that mean? Because let me say how I know it from one belief. Let's say that in Islam they talk about it, where they say, the judgment happens after you're dead, so everybody has to be dead, and then you're supposed to rise up from your grave, and your deeds are now weighed according to good against bad. So that's the picture that when this word resurrection is given. And so is that I mean, that doesn't sound very spiritual somehow, coming from the grave. So maybe you can give the spiritual picture of that. What is this resurrection?
Well, the picture had been wrongly interpreted. That's why it has such a ridiculous effect on many. Resurrection only deals with the inner core of man. The inner core of man, which is spirit. It is the spirit that rises. The physical body, strictly speaking, is only an animated structure. It doesn't have power of its own, but it has been animated and put together. So the physical body may die. That means it will go through a process of disintegration. But that which uses the physical body, which is the spirit, is still alive. And for if a human spirit that has been asleep, that has been to some extent indolent, has been unable to recognize many things, that personality is assumed, in quotes, to be asleep. But when it wakes up, it's more like a resurrection. Resurrection of those innate qualities which have been sown into it. They are now brought into activity such that they can now see what activities they have missed. It depends on what they were able to do. For those who have been asleep all this while, they are now awakened through the word, through what has been provided. They will then judge themselves. So it is the physical body which has been dead, which physical body does not rise, but the spirit which has been asleep comes into activity. To come into activity from one sleep to real activity of recognition may be referred to as a resurrection. Just like you have plants which had initially been dead, but not real dead, because they were, when planted into a soil, they will now rise again. Therefore, one will say it is the spirit which is being referred to, not the physical body, which, probability is subject to dissolution once it has been used here on earth. The physical body is of matter, it is not of spirit. The physical body is temporal. Therefore, it is not the physical body which rises, but the spirit, which makes use of the instrument which it calls the physical body.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I think we can end the show now tonight with coming almost to 8 o'clock now. So, dear listeners, I hope you've enjoyed listening to our show tonight. The topic was the sign of the judgment, or you can call it Judgment Day, or Last Day, or Day of Resurrection, or even the end times. Yes, I will say it was. If I were to take a few lines from it, it's just we have to have a spiritual understanding about these events and matters, and that's not what we are used to, I will say. So it does take a bit of effort from our side to grasp what is being said here, because yes, we are aware of beliefs and teachings, what we have been told in them, and when you come across different teachings, it's even more confusing because they don't align at all. And they talk mostly about earthly things, but this is a spiritual happening. So really, I urge you to, take the spiritual line and ask within yourself to have clarification in that, and ask for help from that within yourself with using your spiritual intuition. That's what we've been granted to have. So, Gregory, anything you'd like to say to the listeners to say goodbye?
Just to ask many to wake up, examine this work, and find what they can make of it, for it could be an eye-opener.
Very good. Thank you for that. So, dear listeners, if you are interested in finding about more about the Grail message or get a copy for yourself, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I spell that www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And thank you for joining us tonight, and hope you enjoyed this show. Sorry for the disruption towards almost at the end of our show. We'll be back next Tuesday, as usual, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. with another topic. I hope you can join us again. And all the best, everyone. God bless. Take care. All the best. Bye now.